about to watch the most comprehensive beginner's guide to Silksong ever created. I'll break down every mechanic, system, and detail, from the absolute fundamentals to the more advanced techniques. By the end, you'll not only understand how Silksong works, but also how to use that knowledge to get the best possible start. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below and I'll do my best to answer them. Now, without further ado, let's get started. We'll start off with the basic controls. I'll be using an Xbox controller, however, I'll show the PlayStation and keyboard keys on screen whenever I mention it. The X button is going to have us do the basic attack. This will be our bread and butter move, and if you hit an enemy, you'll notice we get slightly pushed back from the impact, and the smaller enemies get knocked back a bit as well. This will be super handy to keep foes at bay without getting hit yourself. You can also perform an upswing by holding up and pressing the attack button to hit enemies above. Notably, hitting things with the upswing has no recoil, and this upswing can also be used to hit enemies through platforms, which can make fights extra safe if you want to cheese it. A lot of projectiles can either be outright destroyed or deflected with a well-timed swing of the needle, so keep that in mind when you engage ranged foes. Not only can you do all of these attacks while airborne, but many bosses will require you to do so. Speaking of getting airborne, you can jump by pressing the A button. Give it a quick tap for a small jump, or hold it down for a higher jump. There's a little bit of momentum at work here, but you do tend to start falling pretty quickly after you let go of the button. You'll also notice if you jump near a ledge, Hornet will automatically perform a mantle to get up. If you press jump again during this mantle, you'll propel yourself upwards as if jumping from the platform. While airborne, you can do a downwards attack by holding down and the attack button. This will propel Hornet down in a 45-degree angle and deal the same damage as a normal swing. If you make contact with an enemy, you'll bounce upwards again, giving you the opportunity to chain another downwards attack in and continue to bounce on the enemy. This attack can also be used to bounce off spikes and certain objects, and you'll very quickly get a feel for what you can and can't bounce off. It can take a little practice to get used to the 45-degree angle, but it does eventually become second nature. As you hit enemies with both your standard and downward attack, you'll notice this meter in the top left corner will slowly fill up. This is your Silk meter. Each of your hits will fill one segment of the bar, and this is basically this game's version of mana. You'll be spending this to use abilities as well as heal throughout the game. Enemies are the primary way you fill this bar, but you can sometimes find objects around the world, such as silk spools, that you can hit to replenish it as well. Early on, the only thing you'll have to spend this on is the bind skill. This is performed by pressing, yes, you don't need to hold it, the B button. You'll be locked in place for 1.25 seconds, at the end of which you'll restore 3 masks of health. It'll cost 9 strands of silk to bind, which early on will be your whole bar. This skill can also be used mid-air and even suspend you in place for the duration. Be careful when you use this and plan out your heals, as getting hit midway through will not only stop the heal, but you'll also take damage and lose all of your silk, leaving you with no health and no silk to heal. While fighting, you'll want to keep an eye out for this sound cue and a flash that signals you have enough silk to use bind. And if you miss that, the HUD will also visually change to let you know it's ready. You do have to be a little bit careful about maximizing the heal early on, since you only start with 5 masks of health. Being on 2 masks puts you in one-shot range from the many enemies that deal 2 masks of damage at once. You can pull up your Quickmap with the left bumper, although you'll need to have the zone's map unlocked to actually see anything. We'll be talking about the map in depth later on in its own segment. Now keep in mind, this doesn't pause the game, so make sure you're in a safe spot before taking a peek. This can also be performed while walking or sitting on a bench. If you click down the right thumbstick, you'll perform the challenge. This is the one move you can get through the entire game without even knowing exists, but what this basically does is, for the cost of 1 silk thread, you can do an AoE taunt. This can be useful in niche situations such as aggroing a flying enemy right before a platforming section, and fighting it while you're on solid ground instead of it knocking you down into spikes. It does actually do a small amount of damage if you're close enough to an enemy, about 75% of a normal hit by my estimation, and you can also use it as an alternate way to trigger certain things such as the fast travel call. It does have its uses, but I wouldn't really worry about it too much. If you need a better view of what's above or below you, you can hold up or down to prompt the camera to move in that direction. And you'll definitely need to make use of this for platforming sections, as landing on an enemy or spikes is never fun. Hitting start pauses the game and gives you access to the game settings. We all know what a pause menu is, so I'll move on. Pressing the back button will bring you to the menu screen with multiple tabs. This does also pause the game. We'll briefly go over the tabs, but since I won't yet have explained most of the stuff in them, we'll be covering the specifics later on. The first tab, and the only one you start with, is the Inventory tab. This tab shows any non-equipment items such as keys, quest items, and anything like that, as well as any permanent upgrades and abilities you've collected along the way. Tab 2 is the Crest menu. This is where we see our crest and unlocked tools. This is visible upon obtaining your very first tool. Think of this like the equipment menu from your standard RPG. This is a place where you'll use to equip your various tools and abilities, as well as expand your tool slots. Moving across again, we have our tasks menu. Basically, this is a quest tracker. If you've picked up some quests or aren't sure what you're doing, you'll want to check here. Tab 4 is the journal. This is basically our bestiary. This will just keep track of all the enemies you've encountered and give you some lore. To fully fill an entry out, you'll need to kill an enemy a certain number of times. Once you've done this, you'll see this little symbol down the bottom left corner, as well as hear a sound. There's one symbol the first time you kill something, as well as a second symbol when you've killed enough to fully complete the entry. And the final tab is the map. This one is pretty self-explanatory. This is the world map. Unlike the Quickmap, this one can be used to see more than just the zone you're currently in. And this is the menu. You'll place custom markers if you have any available. That covers the basic controls and menus, but now let's talk about the game's currencies. Enemies can drop one of two different types of currency. These are shell shards and rosary beads. Shell shards will be the first currency you encounter. These are generally dropped by enemies that are more beast-like in nature. You can also find them hidden in caches, often through breakable walls or hidden areas, and in shard bundles. To use a shard bundle, just pop into your inventory menu and hold down the button to convert them from item form to the actual currency. Although early on, it's usually better to just hold on to these until you get to a point where you really need them. Keep in mind you're limited to only holding up to 400 until you can find more upgrades. So what are these shell shards actually for? Shell shards are primarily used in the crafting and replacement process of your consumable tools, and are not dropped on death. And that leaves us with currency 2, Rosary Beads. These can generally be found by killing more civilized types of enemies, and act as the game's primary currency. Rosary Beads will drop in 3 different sizes. The basic red ones are worth 1. Shell rosaries are worth 5, and the bigger pearl rosaries are worth 15. You'll be using these to trade with vendors for just about everything, from new tools, maps, upgrades, and more. These can be found in hidden caches and by breaking down rosary strings from the inventory window. Rosary strings come in a few different sizes, each dropping a different number of rosary beads. Frayed will give you 30, the basic string gives you 60, necklaces give you 120, and so on. And many vendors, as well as these vending machines, can convert your rosary beads into rosary bead strings, for an additional fee of 20 beads of course. Any loose rosary beads are dropped on death, but you'll have a chance to recover them if you can make it back to your body without dying. Essentially, this means the only way to completely guarantee you don't lose any rosary beads is by either spending them, or, if that's not possible, putting them on strings to be used later when you have something to use them on. And as someone who has lost literally thousands of beads by not using them, do not hesitate to convert them over unless you're feeling extremely confident you won't die. Also, keep in mind that since it's always a 20 bead cost to make them into a string, the higher tier strings, such as the necklaces, means a smaller percentage of your beads will be lost to the vendor. Although, having a few lower tier strings is nice for when you only need a few extra beads to buy something. Now let's talk about benches. If you've ever played Dark Souls, benches are this game's version of bonfires. Sitting at a bench is going to restore all of your masks, let you replenish any of your consumable tools, assuming you have the shell shards for it, and allows you to swap around your equipment and abilities. This will also have the effect of respawning all non-boss enemies, so you might have to fight your way back through any enemies you've already killed if you want to backtrack. If you happen to die or quit the game, you'll respawn at the last bench you sat on. This allows what we call the bench warp. Hitting start and exiting the game will save all your progress, but respawn you at the bench. This can be super useful to save time backtracking on some quests. Sitting on a bench will also update any newly explored areas on the map, so long as you have that area's map as well as a quill. More on this in the dedicated map section. Benches can sometimes also make you pay a rosary bead cost the first time you activate them, so make sure you have some rosary beads or a string handy when exploring new areas just in case, because there's nothing worse than finally finding a bench and being nearly dead and not having the rosaries to actually use it. So imagine you had a mountain of rosary beads and died. and now you've respawned at the last bench you sat at. Well, what now? So if you want to recover your Rosary Beads, all you're going to have to do is head over to where you died and go and whack the cocoon you dropped on death. This is going to not only return all of your lost beads, but it's also going to fill your silk meter up completely. So if you lost health on the way back and have enough silk to heal, be sure to do that before you hit the cocoon so you aren't wasting the extra silk it's going to give you. Just make sure you play cautiously on the trip back, because if you die again before hitting your cocoon, you're going to lose all of those beads permanently, which can be extremely tilting. If it was a boss that killed you, sometimes your cocoon's going to be so far into the boss room that you can't recover it without triggering the boss rematch. And if you decide the boss is too hard for now and you want it to come back later, you might think that your Rosary Beads are stuck in there, but you can still leave without leaving your precious Rosary Beads behind. All you'll have to do is run into the room, reclaim your beads, and then just hit start and exit to main menu. Once you reload the game, you should be back on the bench with all your beads in hand. And this is a prime example of how you can use the bench warp to save yourself some time and effort. It's also worth noting that you can actually downward strike your cocoon and bounce off it as if it were an enemy. And this is surprisingly handy if you're trying to recover your cocoon while a boss is attacking, as it can often help you avoid tanking damage. If your cocoon is somewhere you just don't think you'll be able to get back to without extreme risk of dying, and you have a lot of Rosary Beads you don't really want to lose, you do have one more option that will be available to you, and that's going to be to use these Silkeaters. These are reasonably rare early on, so you won't want to be spamming them, but these are going to allow you to instantly recover your cocoon and all of your beads with it. All you have to do is go into your menu, activate the item, and just like that, you'll get your body back and all your beads. Now let's take a look at the tools and the tool system. These are going to be Silksong's equivalent to charms from the original Hollow Knight, or if you just play standard RPGs, this is basically your gear. Tools come in 3 different color types that all focus on a different aspect of the game. To equip these, just sit on a bench and have an open slot with the matching color. Red tools are going to be your active items. Think throwable weapons or self buffs. And unlike passive abilities, these actually have to be used manually to get any use out of. On controller, that's going to be up or down, plus the right bumper. Each tool has a limited ammo shown on your HUD, and you can only replenish it by sitting at a bench while having enough shell shards to craft more. So keep an eye on your resources and make sure you're well stocked up before heading into tougher fights. Eventually, you're going to come across a boss you get stuck on and start eating through all your shell shards. So a little word of advice on how to preserve your tools: it's often useful to spend a few lives just learning the moves without using tools. And then once you're up to the harder phase, you can spam them and improve your chances of beating them. Spamming them every single fight is fun, but you're going to run out of shell shards extremely fast and not be able to use your tools until you go far more. Blue tools are going to be your combat focused passive buffs. These are designed to enhance your damage, bolster your defense, and even improve your ability to cast or heal. Unlike the red tools, which can dish out big bursts of damage if you spam them, blue tools don't need much extra input to provide value. They're always working in the background. Because of this, they form the backbone of most builds, giving you a steady, reliable power that continues to provide value throughout the fight. And finally, yellow tools are going to be your utility and exploration focused passives. These will be helping with everything outside of combat, from movement and exploration to collecting currency more efficiently. While a few yellow tools can offer some combat benefits, they're usually pretty niche or balanced by giving a drawback. Their real strength lies in making your journey smoother and more rewarding, giving you extra convenience and versatility as you explore. Silk skills will be triggered by pressing right bumper and are going to be your big damage button. You can only have one of these equipped at a time from the Crest menu, and they do function similarly to spells in Hollow Knight. I'm not going to spoil any beyond the first one, which you unlock quite early, but once you do collect more, you can freely swap them at the bench in the same menu as your tools. You'll be discovering these skills at key points throughout the world, and each one always costs 4 silk to use, or just under half of a heal. You'll notice the icon on the HUD for them will glow when they're ready, but just keep in mind that they use the same resources as you heal, so you'll need to be deciding between offense and survival. As you progress, you'll find more and more abilities that will allow you to traverse the world in different ways. Take the very first one, Swift Step, for example. This will let you press left trigger to dash, or hold it for sprint. During sprint, you can also press the attack button to initiate the sprint attack. Not only that, but jumping while mid-sprint will allow you to go much further. Or hold backwards while jumping to perform a backflip, which can be handy for getting rid of any extra momentum. This is just one example of an early ability, and I'm not going to be spoiling any others, but these are going to allow you to access areas that you otherwise couldn't physically get to. So every time you get a new one of these, be sure to do some backtracking and see what new locations and secrets you can reach. Learning to use the map effectively is going to be crucial for enjoying your your time in Farloom. Unlike other games, it's not going to be as simple as just walking into a new area and already being able to see where you've been, or even where you currently are. And that's because map features that you might take for granted in other games are locked behind buying specific items in Silksong. All of these map related items are sold by a recurring NPC that you'll find in almost every zone called Shakra. Finding her can sometimes be a bit of a pain, but just keep an eye out for these chakrams she leaves lying around, and if you can hear her singing, you're pretty close. So what are these items and what do they do? First up, we have the area map. This will give you a map of the specific zone it's for. Now, it's not going to show you every area from the start, only the core sections. We, the player, are going to have to explore the rest and fill it out ourselves. To do that, we're also going to need a quill. When used in conjunction with a map, this is going to automatically fill out newly explored areas once we sit on a bench. Before we've had a chance to sit at the bench, areas we've explored will show these broken lines and lack detail. You may have noticed even with the map, you can't actually see where your character currently is on it. That's because for that, we're going to want the compass tool. This is a yellow tool that will display our location on the map. Just remember, this is an actual tool, so you'll need to equip it at a bench after purchasing. Next up, we have map pins. These are going to pinpoint various points of interest as we come across them, such as benches, fast travel points, and vendors. If money's an issue, I would prioritize them in that order as well. Particularly knowing exactly where all the benches are is extremely useful. You don't want to sleep on this. And the last item we can get from her is the custom pin markers. These have names like Shell Marker and Bell Marker. While I highly recommend using these, they're the only things from Shakra I'd consider optional. These can be used by going into the map tab, pressing A, and placing them in spots you want to come back to later, be it an obstacle you can't pass or a boss you can't quite beat. If you're having trouble finding Shakra, she can be found in some of the main towns, and if she's not there at the time you visit, you can actually ring this little bell and summon her. She'll offer all the past maps if you've ever missed any, so don't worry too much if you didn't have enough rosaries and skipped out on buying a map from a certain location. Early into the game, you're going to unlock the ability to use Bellways. Most of these you'll have to pay a Rosary Bead cost to initially open, but once that's done, you can fast travel between any of the currently unlocked Bellways for free. Keep an eye out for these signs which indicate a Bellway is nearby, especially when you're exploring a new zone. Throughout your journey, you'll run into plenty of NPCs, and it's often worth talking to them as many will offer you wishes, this game's version of quests. Wishes can also be found in noticeboards in towns, which will sparkle when new quests are available. Most can be picked up either directly from the NPC or from the board, and you'll track your progress in the task page. Just keep in mind that a lot of later quests only appear once you've met certain conditions, like unlocking a skill or defeating a boss, so it's smart to revisit older boards as you progress, to make sure no new quests have popped up without you noticing. Rewards can range from visual world changes to rosaries, new tools, and more, and you'll usually see the reward listed when picking them up. There are 6 main wish types: Gathering, which have you find and gather specific items; Donate, which will have you donate a set amount of currency; Hunts, which have you slay specific enemies and collect items. These also spawn tracks to help you find their location; Grand Hunts, this will have you kill a specific boss, sometimes spawning a new one just for the quest. These also spawn tracks to help you locate them; Wayfarer, these are basically search and rescue quests, again with tracks to help you find the target; and finally Delivery missions that have you reach a location without fast travel, avoiding too many hits, sometimes even on a time limit. I'd almost always recommend doing these when you come across them, as some of the reward items you can't get any other way. In a world where a lot of enemies can deal 40% of your masks in one hit, Hornet can feel pretty flimsy at times. Luckily, this can be somewhat remedied by increasing her maximum health. To do that, you're going to want to find 4 of these mask shards. These are mostly hidden around the world, but there are a few sold by vendors as well. You can track how many you currently have via the inventory menu. Spool Fragments are also hidden around the world. Collecting 2 permanently increases your silk capacity by 1 thread. Early on, this won't make a huge difference, but once you start stacking them up, it can be nice having enough silk to use a skill even after healing. So you'll definitely want to grab these when you see them. Tool pouch upgrades are also available throughout the world. Most of them just purchased with the Rosary Beads. Each of these are going to increase your shard capacity by 100, as well as increase the amount of tools you can carry before having to replenish them at a bench by 25%. The other item you're going to come across that will help you with your red tools are crafting kit upgrades. These are going to directly boost the damage of any of your red tools, so things like your straight pin and traps will get a direct increase. Although honestly you won't feel a huge difference early on, but once you stack a few of these up, you'll start to feel the extra damage. You're going to get to a point where you've got a heap of cool new tools, but you have no room to fit them, and that's where memory lockets come in. These are reasonably rare items that are hidden around the world, and these will let you gain a slot to equip an additional tool. Just head to a bench, hover one of the empty slots and hold down A or whatever the equivalent button is on your platform and you'll gain an extra slot. Just make sure you have a look at what color the slot's going to be before you unlock it. For example, if you're hoping to throw on an extra blue tool and you open up a yellow slot, then you're going to be stuck not being able to put that extra blue tool on until you find another memory locket. Another material you're going to want to keep an eye out for is Craftmetal. This rare material is again hidden around the world and some raid tools require it in addition to Rosary Beads to purchase, so you want to keep an eye out for these so you can expand your repertoire. You may have noticed an item called a simple key available at the vendor. These keys are going to let you open a variety of locked doors containing anything from new areas or even loot. Any simple key can be used on any door, so you'll run into some parts where you know of 2 doors but only have 1 key and you'll have to make a decision. You will eventually be able to open them all though, and there are enough keys to open everything in the game, so I'd say just go with your gut and don't stress too much. Other than exploring, you're going to be spending most of your time in Farloom fighting off enemies and bosses. And it can be surprisingly deep for a 2D side-scroller, so let's touch on a few mechanics and strategies. The first up is parrying. To perform a parry, you need to swing your nail at the exact same moment an enemy's attack would connect. If timed perfectly, you'll hear a satisfying clink sound, and it will completely negate the damage you would have taken. That said, parrying is generally pretty unreliable. It's satisfying when it happens by accident, but since the timing is so demanding, you should always prioritize dodging first and treat parries as a lucky little bonus. Getting above an enemy and chaining downwards attacks together is what is referred to as Pogoing. The effectiveness of this depends a lot on the enemy type. In an ideal situation, this can give the foe almost no way to hurt your back outside of you making a mistake or missing, although many enemies can have attacks that can make this strategy dangerous to use more than once or twice in a row, so you'll just want to play it by ear. Since every enemy deals contact damage, you'll also have to be careful not to downwards attack too early and risk colliding with them and taking contact damage. During boss fights, outside of just generally avoiding damage, you'll be wanting to look out for 2 things in their attack pattern. The first being heal opportunities. Figure out which attacks leave an opening after you dodge it, or that you can guarantee will miss if you do a certain move such as jumping or dashing away. That'll give you enough time to safely heal. The other is damage opportunities. Try and figure out things like how many hits you can safely do before you'll have to evade, or when you can sneak in a full silk skill without taking a hit, or maybe the boss does a certain attack and you can use your downwards attack to both evade and deal some damage at the same time. If you can master identifying these opportunities and not getting overly greedy, sneaking in more hits than is safe, you'll find difficult fights a lot easier to deal with. The most obvious window for this is when the boss staggers. At certain health thresholds, the boss is going to do a stagger animation, and this is going to give you a chance to either heal if you need to, or get 3 to 4 attacks off as long as you don't hesitate. And it is also going to be the game's only way of communicating to you just how much health the boss has, as there's no health bars otherwise. If you're new to Metroidvania games, the flow and gameplay loop might not come naturally at first, which can leave you feeling lost or frustrated. Here's a quick breakdown and some tips for navigating the world. First of all, whenever you enter a new zone, you'll usually have a few mini objectives in mind. Objective 1 will be find a bench. You don't want to die and have to trek all the way back to recover your body. The world often has signs pointing the way if you're close to a bench, so keep your eyes peeled. Objective 2 will be finding Shakra to get a map. She can appear in different spots depending on the zone, but as I've mentioned, just keep an eye out for the chakrams on the ground and listen for her singing. Once you have the map, it'll become way easier to get your bearings and find your way to the next boss. It's also important to recognize that some parts of new zones, and old, won't be accessible yet. A jump over an early lava pit might just be out of reach. Mark it mentally, or better yet, place a map pin as a reminder to come back later. It's not just physical barriers either. Some bosses are designed to be tackled only once you've unlocked certain abilities. So if you find the difficulty has spiked really suddenly, it might be a sign you're not quite ready for that encounter yet, and you should consider coming back later. This is a common problem with new Hollow Knight players, but if you're completely stuck with no idea where to go, pull your map up, zoom in, and have a look for these gaps in the walls. It can be really easy to overlook 1 or 2 of these gaps on the whole map, which can potentially bring your progress to a grinding halt. Keeping this in your mind will make exploring much more manageable and less frustrating. From this point on through the video, we're going to be entering some light spoiler territory for a few systems and areas. Don't worry, I won't be spoiling any bosses or anything like that, but if you want to maintain the surprise of a few abilities or mechanics, maybe bookmark this one for a bit later. You might be wondering, how do I actually upgrade my needle damage? Eventually, you're going to reach a town called Bellheart, and after progressing far enough through the main quest, you'll find an NPC who can polish your blade. This will permanently increase your damage, and you can repeat this process multiple times. Each upgrade after the first will require an item called Pale Oil. These aren't easy to find. They're well hidden and often locked behind long quests, but once you track them down and bring them back, you'll be enjoying a higher needle damage for the rest of the game. We looked at the crest menu a bit earlier on this video, but what I didn't mention is you'll eventually find new crests as you play. So what exactly is a crest? Well, a crest is the thing you slot your tools into. Each one has different slot layouts, but more importantly, it's also responsible for how your basic moveset behaves. The Hunter's Crest is what we start out with, and using that we have the 45-degree downward strike, decent range on our normal attack, and the standard bind ability. If we swap it out for, let's say, the Reaper Crest, this entirely changes our kit. We now have longer, slower basic attacks. Our down attack is this big cleave, and while in this case the heal behaves mostly the same, we now get an added buff after we use it, and now when we hit enemies, they're going to drop these orbs that give us silk if we attack or run into them. Crests don't change your needle's base damage, but they do change the range and speed at which you can attack. To swap crests, open the crest menu, press Y, and then swap to whatever crest you want. One of my bigger complaints about Hollow Knight 1 was the need to use up a slot just for the compass. And at first glance, it seems like it's the same for Silksong, but there is some good news. There's an item called the Vesticrest that lets you equip a tool in an extra slot that isn't tied to your current crest. To get it, you'll need to have found Atlas in the secret area of Mossholm, and after collecting enough memory lockets, talk to the NPC there to receive the Vesticrest. Then just head to a bench and slot in whichever tool you want. For me, it's always the compass, and from that point on, you'll never have to think about it ever again. Quite a ways through the game, you're going to find an NPC that's going to teach you how to do the needle strike, which is basically a power attack. To perform this, just hold down the attack button and release it once it's fully charged to deal 2 to 3 times the damage of a standard hit. This attack changes depending on your currently equipped crest, and while it's not something you want to spam, it can be useful to charge up during times you couldn't otherwise be attacking anyway. And it could also be handy for one-shotting weaker flying enemies. And finally, let's talk about the Needolin. You'll get this ability around mid-game, and it'll allow you to spend silk to play music. Just hold down the Y button and Hornet will start playing. This does have a practical use by letting you open certain doors, but if you play it near NPCs, they'll also start singing and give you a bit of lore or insight into who they are. The Needolin can also be used in combat to briefly immobilize enemies, and there is a brief moment, maybe 1/5 of a second or so after you stop playing, that you're able to freely move while the enemy recovers, which gives it a tiny bit of combat utility. And that's it guys, you're now fully equipped with everything you need to take on Silksong. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I read them all and I'll do my best to help out. And if you made it this far, a like and a sub would mean a ton. And with that said, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.